Hey friends, if you had a conversation with me in the last 2 months or so, you've probably heard me talk about Stranger Things like non-stop, and I'm sorry. I just really only watched it for the first time, so I'm a little behind everyone else. Even with that, why am I so obsessed with talking about it? And I'll tell you why. It's because I'm starved for decent writing. So when I get decent writing from a well-loved show, it's like when the guy in the desert finally finds water and he just keeps drinking the water over and over again and he can't stop talking about how great the water is. And some people might try and tell me that the writing's like not that good with the show. This show or that show is better. And the problem is most of the shows that people say are good are stuff and shows I would never watch. But even then, I'm well aware that Stranger Things has problems. I know it has problems writing-wise, but that's not what I'm here for right now. And what I'm here for is to praise what's actually good in a series I've been slept on for way too long. Stranger Things is unlike most shows in the sense that pretty much every episode and season, even the worst ones, has a seal of quality to it. I don't think I've ever come out of a Stranger Things episode saying, wow, that was horrible. It just varies from okay, good to great. I think season 1 is probably objectively overall the best written season. It's definitely more tightly written and better from start to finish, but still, that's not really the one I gush over. Season 2 and season 3 are still good. You don't really see people gush about it like you do with season 1 or 4, and that's because while season 2 and 3 are good and have good moments, they really are just that. They're good and serviceable, not great. Enjoyable but not thought-provoking. Season 3 is probably the best example of a season that is super fun to watch, but there's really not that much going on there. There's not that much to analyze or talk about when it comes to good writing. It's just, serviceable writing. I guess if you really wanted to, you could analyze Elle and Mike's relationship, or Max helping Elle find her identity, Hopper's struggle with fatherhood, and yada yada. You get it. But it's not as much of an absolute goldmine of analyzing, talking about good writing that season 4 or even season 1 is. Maybe in another video I'll talk more about how when I think about season 4, which is my favorite season, I retroactively erase 50% of it from my mind and only think about the things in Hawkins. And, maybe one day I'll talk about the other side plots, but a lot of the other stuff is probably why I would say that season 1 is objectively better written. But the stuff that happens in Hawkins in season 4 is the stuff that is the standout, and I'm definitely not the first to say it, probably won't be the last, but every writing choice and moment surrounding Max this season, up to the final moments at least, were fantastic. I can't recall the last time media explored an abusive relationship the way that Stranger Things did. It's probably the first season that Max actually has any character development or real obvious hints that there's stuff going on beyond the surface. Season 2 and season 3, even though I liked her and I thought there was a lot they could do with her, her only real purpose was to drive wedges into pre-established character relationships, which doesn't really warm you up to an audience. In season 2, she was really meant to basically be a wild card and cause conflict before the 4 main boys, and in season 3, she was kind of there to be a friend to Elle and kind of self-project her feelings about men on Elle, making the wedge between Elle and Mike bigger. This season she gets to do something different though, which is to actually have a purpose to the plot separate from pretty much every other character other than maybe Lucas. She actually has a real arc here, and the purpose of Max and Billy existing is really spelled out. The Duffer Brothers really played their cards in showing us exactly why Max should have been added to the cast. In a writing perspective, they also showed their cards in the sense that it's really obvious they wanted someone we care about to be Vecna's fourth sacrifice, but they didn't want it to be one of the main 4 boys or someone from the beginning, so in comes Max. Because this really is a good plot writing device. Killing someone like Max ups the stakes and really feeds into the hopelessness of a situation. So that's really her plot purpose this season, to die and be the 4th sacrifice. But they also did way more than that with her, which is really where all my praise and love for this show comes from. Because the spectacular moments in the season truly are spectacular. I would even say, in my opinion, they're better than a lot of season 1's great moments. I could absolutely praise season 4, episode 4, dude, Billy, for hours upon hours, but I won't. And I'll start from the beginning of the season. She starts the season very obviously going through it. One of the first scenes of her in this season is literally going to a therapist and obviously lying to them that they're getting better. Like, she's isolated, and it's super obvious she has no one to talk to. When we see her at home, her mom is passed out on the couch, so, like, bad news. I think whoever was in charge of Sadie Sink's costume and makeup deserves some praise, because Max looks both super young and innocent, also super depressed and jaded at the same time. Like, she looks like she's going through it. Part of that obviously has to do with Sadie Sink's performance as Max, and I'm still salty that she didn't win any awards for Max this season. Part of the reason why Max's stuff this season even works at all is because of Sadie Sink's acting. Anyway, I think the way that Max is the one who sees all this stuff with Chrissy is pretty well written, because it's obvious she wouldn't have gone to the group if she didn't witness something like this. Something that's pretty small but telling is that Max originally actually tries to go to Lucas, but can't find him, so she goes to Dustin. Yikes. Especially if you see this as an allegory for Max going to her friends for help when she's struggling. The fact that she can't find Lucas is... yeah. Obviously the main episode for Max is Dear Billy, and that's where the juiciest stuff is, but I think a lot of people ignore the fact that without the build-up of previous Max scenes in this season, that episode wouldn't really work. Part of what makes Max stuff so awesome, in my opinion, is because pretty much every scene focusing on her was good or had great writing behind it. I'm not going to talk about every scene because that would take forever, but it is important to recognize that the running up that hill scene and the Dear Billy scenes were not the only well-written parts of her arc. There were tons of stuff before that laid the groundwork. Obviously, Dear Billy really focuses on Max and the ticking time bomb she has on her. They really heavily lean into the allegory here, and it's done super well in my opinion. They have Max totally accept death in a heartbreaking way, and they even go so far as to have her write letters to all her families and friends that they aren't supposed to open while she's still alive, which is supposed to harken to suicide letters. We get some pretty obvious hints that this is the case, with Lucas saying to her that he, quote, doesn't want a letter, that he's, quote, right here. That scene before she reads her letter to Billy has a lot of small moments in it that kind of show how much she just doesn't let any of her walls down whatsoever, which is super in character for her if you've been paying attention to her from day one. Obviously, the super big character stuff happens when Vecna enters the picture. Max's letter is super sad, but it also isn't actually everything she feels. She's still hiding things even from herself, and Vecna totally calls her out on it. He pretty much spells out that she has genuine suicidal thoughts and hates herself for how she thought about Billy, and almost wish he would die because of the way he treated her. It's actually interesting that the most scared we see Max is in this instance. Like, the idea that she's a horrible person and actually confronting the guilt she had is scarier to her than death itself. And that's actually the point. I've seen some people miss that point. Like, they don't get that Max's entire persona in Dear Billy is a facade to act like she's not scared when she clearly is. Obviously, everything else in this episode is spectacular. It's my favorite episode for a reason. To continue with the allegory, she literally starts running towards her friends and loved ones to escape her dark and deadly thoughts. Music, as well as all her good thoughts giving her that strength to do so, was a good touch. Everything comes together, the acting, the cinematography, the music, to really provide a cathartic experience at the end of this episode. I really do feel like some people ignore the fact that without the groundwork, this episode wouldn't work. I've also seen people say that the CGI wasn't the best in the sequence, but like, the CGI isn't really the point, and I think it's serviceable for what the scene is trying to convey. Like, I really do think this sequence is peak television. This is what the mode of media was made for. You would never be able to get something like this in a book, with visual and audio aspects working together to make something masterful and really tell an intriguing story with an uplifting message. I'm actually super surprised how many people missed the, in my opinion, pretty obvious allegory to depression, guilt, and suicidal thoughts this show does with Max throughout the entire season. Like, I can't help but feel like the people who thought Max should have died in the Dear Billy episode were just, like, not paying attention or didn't get what they were trying to do with Max. I feel like it gets pretty obvious that that's what they're doing, especially in later episodes or lines. Even the line right after it being Max saying, "I'm still here," like, that's a neat line, and I feel like pretty telling to what they're trying to do with her. Also, the conversation she has with Lucas, where Lucas says he loves Kate Bush because she, saved Max's life. It's continuing with the allegory, because if you ever looked in the comments of, like, a famous song, people who struggle with mental health problems will comment things all the time about how that song saved their life. Baby, come on, darling, let me steal. I love Lucas and Max this season. I wasn't really a fan of them before this. This season really sold me on them. I think they really showcased Max's growth this season too. I love the little callbacks in the media, and that happened a lot in this season too. Though when shows do a lot of callbacks for one particular character, it always is a little scary for that character, because that usually is spelling out death. And they did that a lot with Max. Like, they did a callback for Max's Halloween mask, and they even had her repeat one of her first lines to Lucas with, quote, "That's presumptuous of you." And that makes for a cute moment, but it still also kind of adds tension, because we as the audience know that when there's a lot of callbacks like this for one specific character, it's usually not a good sign for this character. One of the moments that showcase her growth the most, though, in my opinion, is in the last episode. I believe when she's talking to Lucas via the whiteboard, and she tells him she's glad he's here, which is, she's actually even the one who indicates this conversation. And even just the fact that she wanted him with her is an indication of her growth. She would have never done that before episode 4, Dear Billy. In fact, she didn't do that. When she wanted to go and read the letter to Billy, she didn't want anyone with her. So the fact that she wants someone with her this time is pure character growth. But I think one of the most interesting things with Max is when she admits to Vecna he was right. It's a really, really dark and sad monologue. The fact that she allows Lucas to be in earshot, like I said, especially when this one is more personal and dark than her letter, is also proof of development. It's also really the first time we see her talk about her feelings in a non-calculated way. And they really are some, deep, dark, complex feelings. Admitting that she had nights where she prayed Billy would die because of the way he treated her, and the deep-seated guilt and self-hatred that caused when he actually did die is a darkness that I didn't think Stranger Things, of all things, would tackle. Vecna didn't attack her until after she admits this, which I always felt kind of insinuated he was going to leave her alone for at least a little bit, as she proved to be not as weak as he usually assumed. Vecna's second scene with Max is also really good. I love that he plays on her fear that if people knew how she really felt, they would think she's a bad person. There's more lines that are clearly for the purpose of the allegory, like, "I thought you were getting better," which is a line people say in real life to people who are trying to get mentally better, but maybe fell back into it. It's great that they show that mental health problems aren't as easily solved as listening to Kate Bush, and that they don't simply end when you seek help. It's a struggle. I feel like it's fitting this came out in 2022, with everyone reeling from the lockdown and mental health problems that arise from it. Of course this was going to resonate with a lot of people after that. They continue with the allegory by having Max literally retreat into her happiest memories, having its references with bloody balloons popping, and then having Vecna also literally rot her happiest memory. It's also super cute that her happiest memory is when she went to the ball with Lucas. Even after all these years, that's her happiest memory. I mean, I guess it's only 2, but honestly, the rest of the scenes with Max in it are only for the purpose of showing that she's getting to be more and more danger. And she really has to rely on Elle to save her, which is kind of interesting because that means she's in a vulnerable position, which is something that she's been fighting to not be in the entire season. And eventually she had to realize she can no longer save herself. That's actually why she thought Elle was her own doing. She thought that maybe she created it herself and she could save herself, but no, she couldn't. And that's also kind of adding to the allegory. So the Duffer brothers have kind of run into a problem now, because Vecna targeted Max, and Max escaped the first time. And because of that, Vecna's victory is directly linked to Max's fate. Because if they want Stranger Things 4 to be a Stranger Things version of The Empire Strikes Back, which I believe they said in the interview, which means that they wanted a major loss of the good guys and a major victory for the bad guys, then Max kind of has to die. The thing is, though, even though that's her plot purpose, she gets something this season that she's also never had before. A character purpose, an arc that, though directly connected to the plot, is really for the purpose of developing the character and not necessarily to move the plot forward. If you haven't figured it out by now, her character purpose is to find the will to live again and to fight for her life. And she does that, but in order for this character purpose to feel even remotely satisfying in the end, she can't really die. So when she volunteers to be bait to Vecna, even though it's logical and realistically probably the only way they could defeat him at that moment, it sort of raises the question about whether or not she really did get her will back to live, or if that was simply something that happened spur of the moment and has since dissipated. So it's a predicament, a writing predicament. she has to die for her plot purpose, and she has to live for her character purpose to be satisfying. And if you can't tell, those are mutually exclusive. Well, what they choose to do is pretty interesting. They write a pretty heartbreaking death scene where she says some things that are etched in my mind, like, I can't see, I can't feel anything, and I'm scared, Lucas, I'm so scared, I don't want to die. Which, like, why did you have to do this to me? Lucas's frantic reassurances and asking his little sisters for help, which was ad-libbed by the talented actor, by the way, are just so heartbreaking. She dies and fulfills her heartbreaking plot purpose, with the fourth sacrifice being success and Vecna winning. They have gotten truly and utterly their Empire Strikes Back Stranger Things season. But, like, Max can't die for her character to be satisfying, remember? So she doesn't really die. 11 apparently restarts her heart, and Max lives. I can go into how this moment is both important for Max's character in a much more obvious way, and 11's character, as it's the first time Ella does anything constructive and not destructive with her powers. But 11 herself might be a topic for another video. So the Duffer Brothers did it. They made Max fulfill both purposes. So why do most people, including me, feel conflicted about it? I explained why I believe the writing choice was made, but I feel like most people can tell they really just found a clever way to get out of a problem of their own doing. And it is clever, but it does kind of muddle both of her purposes. By making Max come back to life, her plot purpose isn't really fulfilled because she didn't really die. They fixed this a little bit by making her in a coma and having Elle not be able to find her mind, which I'm sure will be important in the last season. So there's still a little bit of that hopelessness and the weight loss to it. But by making her in a coma and her mind not there, her character purpose is also kind of muddled because she didn't really live. So you can see why this is a little bit of a problem, right? Luckily, it's a problem that only exists because there is no season 5 right now. Even though it kind of feels a bit muddled right now, they left so many story options open for Max. They kind of wrote themselves in a corner, but a good corner, because it's a corner in the sense that almost any place they take Max's character will be interesting, except death. There's no doubt in my mind that Stranger Things writers are competent writers. They really did do something amazing with Max Mayfield, and I hope Season 5 continues to do this side character turned main justice. After all, I know I'm not the only one that wouldn't be totally against the show now being all about Max Mayfield. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this little analyzation. Maybe I'll do more, probably not, but yeah. Thanks, I hope you have a wonderful day.